Back in 399 BCE, the Greek city-state of Athens executed a man for asking too many questions. He was not a thief, nor a killer, nor even a revolutionary. What he was guilty of was spending his life asking questions in the Athenian marketplace, engaging in conversations that forced citizens to explain and defend what they believed. His name was Socrates. The charge? Corrupting the youth. But the real reason he got executed was because he made adults uncomfortable. Every culture tells itself a story. That story values intellect. It celebrates brilliance. It builds institutions to educate brilliant minds, conduct cutting-edge research, and honor the contributions of its greatest thinkers. We put geniuses on postage stamps and textbooks. We create prizes and scholarships in their names. But the curious thing is that while all societies have a narrative celebrating intellect, all documented history tells a dramatically different story. Instead of celebration, the theme is punishment, not once or twice, but over and over. For example, take Hungarian physician Ignaz Semmelweis in 1847. He discovered that doctors were killing their patients, specifically that when a doctor performed an autopsy then delivered a baby soon after without washing his hands, there was a near five-fold increase in death due to childbed fever compared to women delivered in the midwife ward. The solution? Wash your hands. The medical establishment didn't buy it. They ridiculed him, dismissed him from his position, and for the next few decades of his life, he waged an impossible battle trying to convince an industry that wouldn't listen. Under constant pressure, he became increasingly erratic. Eventually, he ended up in a mental institution, and he died there at age 47. Germ theory was confirmed 17 years later. Next, let's consider Turing. Turing broke the Enigma code, which some historians believe may have shortened World War II by 2 years. As gratitude, the British government charged him with the crime of homosexuality, chemically castrated him, stripped him of his security clearance, and banned him from working at the government research center. Turing killed himself 2 years later under mysterious circumstances. Tesla also died in a New York hotel room, penniless and alone, shortly after contributing significantly to the invention of what would become the electrical industry. Meanwhile, Socrates was sentenced to death by his own society. Again, these are not random examples, they're a data set, because the important question isn't what went wrong, but what is the same? Here is where most people expect an obvious answer: jealousy, politics, corruption. While those are certainly factors in play, they don't tell the whole story. That's because the same dynamic is also visible among regular, non-famous people, including highly gifted children. Now, it's not that they necessarily misbehave or do anything wrong. The uncomfortable truth is that being around a highly intelligent person can trigger a fight or flight response in the brain. Psychologists call this identity protective cognition. When a belief becomes tied to identity, contradicting that belief no longer feels like a normal intellectual disagreement. It starts feeling personal. The crucial detail is that a threat demands a defensive response, not a curious one. This explains why most intelligent ideas meet with a response along the lines of, who do they think they are? In fact, one of the most famous passages in philosophy discusses precisely this problem. The great philosopher Plato, student of Socrates, spent decades after his teacher's death thinking about this situation. Imagine a group of people chained inside a cave since childhood, unable to turn their heads, and only able to see shadows cast on a wall by a burning fire behind them. Then imagine that one of the prisoners gets liberated and turns around. He sees the fire, walks outside, sees the real world, the sun, the sky, all colors, shapes, textures. He then returns to the cave to describe his discovery to the other prisoners. Naturally, they do not greet him with gratitude. On the contrary, because they've never seen anything beyond their shadows before and cannot imagine such a place, they perceive him as dangerous. In fact, Plato describes that if the prisoners had the power to kill the man who revealed his truth to them, they would gladly do so. Plato wasn't describing an abstract allegory. He was talking about what happened to his beloved teacher. And the reason the passage is still quoted almost 2,000 years later isn't that it's an inspiring allegory, it's that it keeps happening in real life. Someone who understands more of reality than others does not necessarily get thanked. Instead, he or she is accused of lying, destabilizing others, or being dangerous. Because what they're essentially saying is, I know you don't understand something. Now watch as I tell you the things that exist beyond your understanding. But there is a reason this happens, and it's deeper than a matter of identity. Because humans are a tribal species. Most of our evolutionary history consisted of being part of small groups in the wild, where belonging to the tribe was a matter of life or death, and groups cannot function if everyone is going their own way. That means they need conformity in behavior, behavior, belief, and rules. The pressure to conform is so great, in fact, that even human societies have evolved mechanisms for dealing with extreme outliers. In some societies, it's called tall poppy syndrome, basically shooting anyone who grows too tall. In others, this shows up as mockery, ridicule, shame, or social exclusion, all of which sounds logical on the surface. Groups do need conformity. There is value in that, but there is a price as well, because the instinct that once allowed small tribes to survive never went extinct. It simply mutated. In the modern world, with increasingly complex problems that require precisely the kind of thinking that destroys group cohesion, or the ancient mechanism now punishes exactly the kind of thinking that the society desperately needs. What makes things even more complicated is that highly intelligent people do not always play into this dynamic. Often they make things worse. The same cognitive capacity that allows a person to see further than others also comes with a specific weakness, namely a tendency to underestimate the consequences of being right. For example, Ignaz Semmelweis knew he was right, but the more frustrated he became at the medical establishment for refusing to acknowledge his discovery, open letters to individual surgeons accusing them of murdering their patients. This was, of course, completely justified. The man was right. Unfortunately, what he was also failing to realize was that the problem wasn't an intellectual issue, it was a social one. Being right isn't enough. And in many cases, people who can see further than others overestimate others' thirst for truth and underestimate their attachment to their beliefs, not because their beliefs are good or bad, but because they define their identities. People who are brilliant often assume that they should approach the issue logically and prove their point through reason, which makes them both uniquely dangerous and uniquely vulnerable. So why are intelligent people so scary to societies? Not because of their discoveries, but rather because of what they reveal. Every society has a story, a way of understanding reality, and when people start seeing things that don't fit this story, they become problematic. Not because they threaten the story deliberately or maliciously, simply because they see what others do not want to see. That is why Plato understood this problem 2,000 years ago. That is why Semmelweis lost his sanity trying to persuade an establishment that rejected him and ridiculed him. Turing discovered that society punishes people for discovering its weaknesses and paid with his life. And yet, the very same phenomenon repeats itself in contemporary society, only not in executions or asylums, but in boardrooms, classrooms, comment sections, and anywhere intelligent people are discussing important issues. Because the minute somebody says something that nobody wanted to hear, why is it so difficult for us to appreciate the truth?